Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm the speech pathologist working with Noah. This presentation will run you through Noah's communication styles and how we can support him to develop further communication skills. To get us started, I thought it would be a good idea just to talk a little bit about what communication is. So very simply, communication is defined as the exchange of messages. So we generally exchange messages for a variety of reasons, which we call communication intent. So we do this to establish social closeness, express our needs and wants, to transfer information, or for social etiquette. We also look at the function of the communications. So we can request things, we can refuse or protest, gain attention, label and describe, comment, ask and answer questions, express feelings, engage in social routines, and share experiences with others. Communication is all around us. It's very second nature to people that are typically developing, and it's not something we give much thought to throughout the day. So I guess it's really important just to highlight some of these things and just to really give a think back to what communication is as a whole, so that we can really focus on how to support that across lots of different activities and through lots of methods of communication. Communication is a human right, fundamental to literacy development and participation in education, and occurs all day, every day. We're responsible for making sure that this happens for everyone. In the speech pathology world, we love to talk about the Communication Bill of Rights, which you can see up on the screen. So this just goes through all the different reasons we communicate and what everyone should be able to communicate to do. So they should be able to express their feelings, to understand communication from others in whatever form that is, to reject, to request information, to have access to information, to be communicated with in a dignified manner, to aid services and resources to assist communication, to be listened to be included in social interaction, to learn about yourself, to learn about life, and to be offered choices. When we talk about how competent someone is in terms of communication, there's a few different ways we can describe it. So we can talk about their communicative autonomy, which is being able to say what they want to say to whoever they want to say it to, whenever they want to say it. And we can break this down into autonomous and independent communication. So autonomous communication that happens in a fluid motion and can be very efficient is not necessarily independent. So for example, if you think of someone who uses a communication book but doesn't have the fine motor skills to flip through that book, they're not independent in flipping through the book and having someone help them, but their communication method might still be efficient if they've got a very good and understanding communication partner. But then independent communication is also not necessarily autonomous. So if you think about someone who can communicate independently but doesn't have the means to communicate exactly what they want when they want it, that's a very good example of independent communication that's not autonomous. Communication comes in many forms. In everyday life, every single person uses multiple forms of communication throughout the day, even those people without a disability. So we communicate through speech, vocalization, so things like sighing that aren't actually words, but the sound still means something, body movements, facial expressions, keyword sign, which is also sometimes referred to as Makaton, aided language systems, which are paper-based visuals, and electronic systems. So 1/3 of our natural communication throughout the day is spoken, and 2/3 of our communication throughout the day is actually non-spoken. So within a natural setting with people who are typically developing, there's a significant amount of communication that's actually naturally multimodal. If we think about a typical scenario where we're not able to understand someone, whether that's because it's a really loud environment or whether they speak a different language, there's some things that we just naturally do, like using pens for writing or using our hands to gesture, that are just a natural afterthought and natural way of us communicating as a backup. So there's multiple systems that we use, and we can select the most effective or preferred method in any individual situation depending on the environment. We also, as speech pathologists, term some of this as alternative and augmentative communication, which is referred to as AAC for short. This is just defined as the strategies used to support, so augment, or instead of, verbal output, including non-verbal information and low high-tech systems. So AAC is naturally incorporated into our everyday environments, but we specifically as speech pathologists look at this particularly for people who are non-verbal and how we can enhance their environments. Quickly run you through the different types of AAC. So the first lot that we'll talk about is technology-based AAC. So we categorize this into low and high tech. So low tech is something that's static but still has a battery power source. It may have a live voice or a pre-recorded message. So this is something like Noah's talking tiles, or something like a Go Talk, which you can see pictured on the screen, which is similar in that it's a single voice message output but has different messages that you can press. There are also high-tech systems, which is what people generally think of when they think of AAC. So high-tech is something that has a rechargeable battery pack, or it's dependent on mains power. It generally has a dynamic display, which means that the screen can change. So if you go into a folder, you'll get different vocabulary, and it often has a navigation system, and it's synthesized or voice banked voice output. Then we can look at the non-tech based AAC. So unaided AAC is things that you don't need an additional tool for. So this is most often where we use our body, so things like facial expressions, gestures, or some people will like raise a hand or tap someone else's hand to indicate yes or no. We also have light tech AAC, which is static and it's often made from paper and pen. So this is things like picture boards or the communication pillows that we will be making for Noah. There's no one system of AAC which is better than another. We all naturally use different AAC systems in different environments depending what's needed and what's most suitable for that environment. So if you're really far away from someone, using a small picture to communicate to them that they won't be able to see isn't going to be effective, so we might use gestures but use really big movements of our hands. Light or low-tech systems may be more helpful for things like meal times or sensory play or bath time where water's involved and you don't want to get iPads wet, but obviously having high-tech systems with dynamic displays gives us more options for vocabulary as well. Here I've tried to provide some specific examples of communication styles and methods that Noah implements every day. Noah is able to use a range of sounds, whether these are words or non-words, so what we call vocalizations. He uses these to gain attention and to interact with others. He uses body movements, so things like moving towards something he likes or moving away, or even his body tensing up when he's not happy is definitely a form of communication. He's able to use a range of gestures such as pointing to things, nodding his head, sticking his hand in front of his face when he wants you to say yucky or smelly. He's able to use facial expressions to indicate his emotions, and he also has a low-tech AAC system, which is his talking tiles. So now I want to talk a little bit about how we learn to communicate. So first we need to experience communication, then we learn to understand it, and then we learn to express it. So if you think of a typically developing child, particularly an infant, they spend 12 months at least generally experiencing sounds and experiencing language, and then they start to understand, so they can start to follow instructions or identify body parts and things before they even start talking. And then generally at about 12 to 18 months, they start using words to communicate. But they generally always understand more than they express. The typically developing child will have been exposed to oral language for approximately 4,380 waking hours by the time they begin to speak at about 18 months of age. AAC learning is actually the same as the way we learn to speak orally. So we first need to experience AAC, understand how to use it, and then we can start expressing with AAC. There's a catch-22 here though, because we can't spontaneously uptake something that is not there. So if you think about the typically developing child, they're exposed to oral language for so many hours before they start speaking. But that's just something that naturally exists in the environment. AAC and aided language, particularly, or high or low tech systems, don't naturally exist in the environment. So they can't just naturally learn to use these. And this is often where professionals such as speech pathologists intervene. We provide aided language based on the expectations of what is possible and what an individual needs to be able to communicate. So they can only demonstrate the ability to use what there is to use. The statistic that I shared before, that it takes verbally speaking children about 4,380 waking hours for them to speak. It would actually take 84 years for someone to learn to use an aided language system that is only modelled to them for 20 to 30 minutes a week during their speech pathology sessions. That means that it's really important for everyone in a person's life to model aided language systems to them so that they can learn their systems and use them effectively in a shorter time frame. And if we expand on this, children who are typically developing demonstrate full language competency somewhere between 9 to 12 years of age because they've been immersed in and practicing oral language for about 36,000 waking hours. And during this time, they're receiving corrective feedback while practicing using oral language. At twice a weekly therapy, 20 to 30 minutes of each therapy block, it would take an assemble user 701 years to have the same experience, which is clearly just not possible and continues to prove how important it is that communication systems are modelled outside of speech pathology. Noah and Karen have two main goals for speech pathology in regards to Noah's communication. The first goal is to engage more readily with the communication systems that Noah already has so that he is able to make choices with daily routines, environments and activities and participate in social interactions. The second is to continue to explore communication methods and various options across all environments, which continues to be addressed through discussion through myself and Karen and the teachers and different support workers about different things that we can be doing and what would work in different environments. In terms of future goals and where we're heading with this, Noah's communication is limited to what he has access to because he isn't able to verbalize different words. This means that whatever picture symbols or talking tiles we give him are the only things that he can say or communicate, and that really limits his vocabulary as well as the range of functions that he's able to communicate for. Noah needs to understand how to use his communication system first so that we can then add more vocabulary and build on that. And so we're really trying to build a strong foundation of learning the basics first. Noah's at a point where he has demonstrated appropriate implementation of the talking tiles, and now it's about expanding on them and giving him different things to communicate within what he's wanting. And communicative functions are constantly being reviewed and will continue to be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure that Noah is able to access the Communication Bill of Rights and communicate for all of those different reasons. With all that information in mind, let's now talk about some strategies of how we can increase Noah's communication and increase his access to devices to be able to support his communication. These are really important for everyone in Noah's team to be using regularly. Some of them are quite simple and things you would already be doing, but some of them might just be a reframing of how we're thinking about them. Strategy is modelling, which is just demonstrating the skills that we would ideally like Noah to use in the future. So this is just verbalizing words to represent what he's asking for, or pressing a talking tile to represent what he's trying to say. The next strategy is expansion. So this is just extending what Noah is doing. So if he presses more on a talking tile to indicate he'd like more blippy, you could press more and then the blippy talking tile to show him that we can put two words together. This also incorporates expanding Noah's current range of communicative functions. So for example, if we added some question words in, you could model using question words to expand Noah's understanding of language. The next strategy is just to attribute meaning. If we think about an infant who says Baba, we might interpret that to mean, oh, you see a baby. And it's quite intuitive for us to interpret the messages that infants say and the sounds that they make, because this is really how they start building their awareness that the sounds that they make can actually influence or label things in the environment around them. Similarly to how we would do that with infants, we want to be attributing meaning to the sounds that Noah makes and the actions that he makes. So even if he is babbling and pressing on the devices and pressing the talking tiles and you think it's somewhat inappropriate, we want to attribute meaning to that and provide appropriate responses to what Noah is communicating in all the different ways. The next strategy is total communication. So this is just acknowledging all attempts at communication, no matter whether they're pressing a talking tile, Noah using his body, or using verbalizations. We don't want to enforce that Noah uses one particular system when another method might be more convenient at that point in time. A really good example of this is for people who learn multiple languages. If they came up to you and said, could I have some food please? And you turned around and said, wait, no, you have to tell me in the other language first, even though you've understood what they said, that gets really frustrating for people. So we want to make sure we're continuing to model the different ways that Noah can communicate, but accepting all forms of his communication as valid. The last strategy is verbal referencing. There is a separate video just on this strategy alone, which isn't super long, but it's just labeling what a person is doing, like what communication behavior they're doing, and labeling your interpretation of that message. So the example on the slide is, you are leaning towards your food. I think you're telling me that you want more, and pressing the more talking tile. This is just enabling Noah to recognize his behaviors as a way of communication so that we can shape them and provide clearer communication methods. When verbal referencing, it's important to say, I think, or I wonder if you're telling me, because without being in Noah's head, we can't truly know what his behaviors are actually trying to tell us. That's all for this video. If there are any points that you're wanting further clarification or understanding on, I'm very happy to talk through anything. If you can flick me an email, I'm happy to organise a time to chat through face-to-face, over the phone, or just communicate via emails to provide some further understanding. You guys are a crucial part of Noah's team, not only for supporting him in his everyday, but supporting him to develop his communication skills. And without your valuable input in this area, Noah's going to take a really long time to develop communicative competency, and we want to make sure that's as quick and efficient as possible. We would love any feedback about any particular vocabulary or points in the day where communication is tricky and we're needing extra resources. Obviously, you guys spend a lot more time with Noah than I do, so it's great to have feedback from different perspectives and different people doing different activities. I guess the fundamental thing we want to come back to is that Noah has the right to be able to say whatever he wants to whoever he wants, whenever he wants, but he needs our help to be able to do it. And it's great to work as a team to facilitate that and facilitate his skills and access to communication.